do it, baby. Yeah, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Stokastic.com NFL Showdown, live before lock, presented by No House Event. What a mouthful that is. Happy to be with you guys. As always, it's Jags and Jets. And before you go, oh, what a dog shit game. I can assure you it's not. This is actually one of the more exciting Thursday night football games we'll have this year because you could have some inclement weather, some heavy rain coming in late. The Jags now favored -140 to win the AFC South with this Ryan Tannehill news. The Jets clawing their way back to a position to where they can get in. They're at home with Zach Wilson under center. I'm telling you, this might actually be fun. But more than anything, we're happy to have you guys with us. I'm happy to all 56 of you who have already hit that thumbs up. You just come in, you know the drill, and I don't have to ask. And I appreciate that, especially in the holiday season. All right. I'm Dave Loughran at Loughran_D, LOUGHY_D, joined as always by the Showdown Shaman, Neil Orfield at PlayerQ DFS. Neil, Christmas right around the corner, man. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for Christmas season. You were the one who informed me about the main slate being on Saturday this week. And I'm excited about that. I'm happy to have the main slate on Saturday because I am ready for it. This is week 16. I know people are sick of hearing about other people's best ball teams. So I'm not going to tell you about my teams. I'm just going to say I'm excited for this week of best ball, hoping to finally get one through to the final. I'm excited for this game. I mean, it's as we were talking about before the show, it's the number 1 and number 2 pick from last year's draft. I'm also, I think, going to drive out to Minneapolis and watch the game at a bar with my friend who is from Alaska, but somehow became a diehard Jags fan. So I'll be cheering for the Jaguars tonight.
He's one of the only ones.
I know, especially from outside of Florida.
Yeah, right. I'm rooting for the Jags. Also, Neil, because this is the last time that some people may see us before Christmas. Like, I know you're on the Saturday show, but you know what? People travel. People have things to do. Now that I'm on a strategy, this might be the last time people see us before Christmas. So I poured a nice little shot here. Mike Lawrence has, what do you got, Mike? some type of bourbon. I don't know. He's muted. And then Neil refused to go in his basement to grab the liquor. So he's got a fat ass mug of beer right there.
Okay. To be clear, I would have grabbed it if you had told me like 4 minutes early. It was like literally a minute before the show was going to start. You're like, let's do shots. I'm like, I don't have stuff up here to do shots.
I think
so
it was
I'm going to stick with the beer. Yeah, it was. It was like, we're already late. I'm not going to go grab a shot, but I'll drink my beer for you.
Kind of funny coming from you though, the guy that steps away at 7:15 before every show.
Well, yeah. I also already had a beer poured up here, so
I know. All right, so what I'll do is I'll rip this shot. I'm gonna wait till everybody in the chat goes and gets themselves a drink. Dirty Hippie said he's pouring himself a Captain and Coke, or I know how some of you guys roll. Maybe a pack at a bowl, hitting the pen, whatever it is. We'll do one together in just a couple minutes. Let's give them a couple seconds to get settled. A little virtual cheers here, Neil. And you have to pound that beer.
You know what I've been doing? I can't pound it because I'm going to have to pee in 20 minutes. And I don't want to leave the show. What I've been doing lately, speaking of packing a bowl, that kind of stuff, we now have the liquor stores in Minnesota now are selling THC drinks. So sometimes if I want a little healthy break from alcohol, I'll still sip on a THC drink. It's really enjoyable.
Do you like legitimately, do you get high from them?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty low tolerance. I don't consume a lot of marijuana generally. I'm pretty casual about it. I've never, like, prior to it being legal in Minnesota, I've never bought marijuana for myself. It's always just been like my friends will have it around, so I'll just, when it's convenient, then I'll consume, but never been a huge consumer of marijuana. So, and this is actually not marijuana, it's all hemp based, because marijuana, I don't even really understand the distinction, but I know marijuana is still illegal in Minnesota, but hemp based THC is fine. So it's a weird thing going on here,
but it does the job.
Does the job. Yep.
I could not do a show. Doing shows high would be difficult.
I wouldn't try it. I mean, if I started drinking it during the show, I wouldn't be high until after the show, so I'd be fine. But yeah, so far not
unless
trying
you're on
that.
an empty stomach and you didn't think about that, and then it hits you way too quick.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's assume that everyone's good to go here. Click the lighter, tip them back, whatever it is. Merry Christmas to you guys. Let's talk football. Salute, boys. All right, let's do it. Ooh, yes. All right. Football time. Jets, Jags, 60 or 36.5 point total. This has been bet down from 43. I'm almost leaning over here just because it's been bet down. I mean, a 2017 game hits the over. Do you look at this game and see anything that stands out in a way that you're going to play it differently? For example, the weather here, it looks like around midway through this game, it's supposed to get rough. As far as rain, a little bit, it doesn't seem like crazy wind, but Ray, yeah, I think that was probably before Mike White was ruled out and before the weather got bad, but it was definitely 43. Are you playing this differently because of the weather? Like, will you have certain builds that are played for weather? What are you doing with kickers? And we'll get to this, but just your overall idea of how this works with the type of conditions we've got today.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. So it's definitely an impact, definitely a factor for me. I think it makes me like the running backs a little bit better, and even like maybe makes me like Michael Carter a little bit better, because that would be like Zach Wilson probably not going to be able to throw it very far in these conditions, but maybe it means he's just going to dump it off a little bit more. He historically has not thrown it to Michael Carter as much as the other Jets quarterbacks, but maybe in this game, because of the weather, it'll go shorter to Michael Carter a little bit more. I recommended in my article, Jamal Agnew is a guy that I'm going to consider here because of the weather, because he's the kind of gadgety player. We had a game like this where I recommended Laviska Shenault, one of those calls. I haven't had many, a lot of my favorite plays recently have not been working out, but Laviska Shenault, maybe a month or so ago, I liked because of the bad weather and because he's the type of player who, can benefit sometimes if the team needs to get a little bit different on account of the weather. And that one worked out. He scored a long touchdown. I think Jamal Agnew is the same sort of player who has that sort of ability to maybe benefit from bad weather, because they're just going to do more gadgety things, and he's a speedster. So he's a guy I have a little bit more interest in because of the weather. But then other than that, yeah, it's just the running backs. Maybe makes me like the kickers a little bit worse. Maybe makes me like the defenses a little bit better. It's hard to say that because the teams might not throw the ball as much, and obviously the best case for a defense is you're getting some interceptions, and that I think it's easier to return an interception. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think it's generally easier to return an interception for a touchdown than a fumble, just because you're already upright and moving around. So yeah, in general, I'd say I like the defenses better. I like the kickers better. I like Jamal Agnew better. Off the top of my head, I think that's and maybe the quarterbacks. Like I think that it makes it a little bit more likely that these quarterbacks run the ball a little bit more. So maybe you don't need to stack them up as much as usual. Is one thing that I'm starting to think about as we get closer to lock. I'm thinking maybe I don't need the double stacks as much, even if the quarterback's in the captain spot, just because they might do more on the ground here.
Let's talk quarterbacks because I got a nice segue for that. When Trevor Lawrence played in bad weather earlier this year, it was against the Eagles. I think it was like week 4. It was cold. It was at the Link in Philly. And the weather, the rain was, like, as Ben would say, pseudo monsoon in that game, right? Ben put pseudo in front of everything. We talked about that this morning on the strategy show. Pseudo monsoon. And he lost 4 fumbles. He could not hold on to the football. Lost 4 fumbles. Now, is that something that they've fixed? You would certainly hope so, right? Like you would certainly assume that this is something they fixed. But at the same time, they're missing 2 starting offensive linemen, 2 key offensive linemen. That makes me a little bit skeptical here. I still think they're going to throw the football, both teams. I do. Like the Jags defense is 32nd in DVOA against the pass. They're much better against the run. Yeah, it's going to rain, but it's not going to be like Cleveland this week. It's not going to be like Chicago this week. I'm not saying we see 50 pass attempts each, but I'm not expecting this to be one of those games where it's just pure slop conditions for 3 straight hours and neither quarterback is attempting passes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's that kind of game either. We're seeing wind gusts, but not necessarily terrible sustained wind. So they're probably going to try to throw it. It's just a matter of, are they going to have any success throwing it? It is going to be windy throughout the game. It's going to be rainy throughout the game, more so in the second half. So there's definitely an impact. But yeah, I think that it's probably not going to be a 3-pass game like we had with the Patriots last year.
Probably not. Yeah, with Mac Jones. And they won.
Yep.
How much Trevor Lawrence are you trying to get to today? I want to update our tools because earlier we actually had Zach Wilson projected better.
We still
Trevor
do.
Lawrence. What's that?
Yeah, I just pulled up Fantasy Cruncher because I'm starting to make my lineups. Yeah, we actually have Zach Wilson projecting even like more so now. Like earlier in the day, as I was doing my Fantasy Cruncher VODs, they were projected about the same. They're both projected for about 15 fantasy points. Now Zach Wilson's down to 14.73. We got Trevor Lawrence all the way below 14 fantasy points now. So his projection has dropped. Yeah, at least in my my latest Fantasy Cruncher. Yeah, it's dropped quite a bit, which yeah, that's it's pretty interesting. And that must be a result of the game total coming down a bit. But yeah, man, that's tough. I don't know. So you think if he fumbled it 4 times, is that an issue for Trevor Lawrence, this holding on to the ball in bad weather? I don't know. But if it is not an issue, I think that maybe he'll rush a little bit more. I think that if the teams are smart, that's probably what they do. They probably have their quarterbacks rush it a little bit more because of the weather. But just looking at our tools, it looks like we've actually got Trevor Lawrence a little bit over-owned in both the utility and the captain spot. In the captain spot, we've got Trevor Lawrence projected for 7.6% ownership, 5.9% chance to be an optimal. So negative leverage there. Util, 42% ownership, 39.7% chance to be an optimal. A little bit of negative leverage there. Doesn't really surprise me just because of the price tag. Like he is the highest salary player on the slate by far, and he isn't the highest projected player on the slate. There are a few players who project better than him, so not a huge surprise to see that we've got some negative leverage there. But maybe I'm just trying to tell myself a story that Trevor Lawrence will run it more because of the bad weather, because I want him to, because I think he should, and because I've got him in some best ball. But if they're logical, you'd think that they'd rush it a little bit more. So I'm hoping that that's the case, and I'll take some shots. And also they might not have a choice in the second half. If they're down to this Jets team, they're probably going to have to throw the ball a little bit more, or at least, even if they're short passes, they're going to try to find ways to have long plays. So yeah, I think Trevor Lawrence, I like him just fine. He's got rushing upside. Both these quarterbacks have some rushing upside, which is kind of fun. Neither of them really elite, but it'll be interesting to see whether they spike more of a rushing upside because of the weather here.
Eric asked, do the projections account for weather? Yeah, but they account for the Vegas total, which accounts for weather. So yeah. Yes. And the total has continued to slide. I don't know, man. Like Trevor Lawrence could still get picked or fumble and still have a decent game. It's not like oftentimes that leads to a better game. I'm not comparing Kirk Cousins last week against Indy, but just in the same vein, Kirk Cousins was awful in the first half, awful, and then ended up going up because sometimes your interceptions and your mistakes and all these miscues that lead to defensive touchdowns force you to throw the football more. So that's the funny thing. Like, even if this is a bad weather game, if the bad weather causes fumbles or interceptions and defensive touchdowns or good field position, and a team goes down by a bunch, then you have to throw. You don't exactly have a choice. So a lot of this is going to be game script dependent. Are you captaining a lot of Wilson and Lawrence today, though? That would be the way to ask this. I think that makes the most sense. Not to do that, but how to phrase this question.
So, I mean, what we're seeing, as I said, negative leverage on Trevor Lawrence, actually a little bit of positive leverage on Zach Wilson. He's 1,600 cheaper than Trevor Lawrence. So that's not a huge surprise. Also in a much better matchup. The Jags, one of the worst pass defenses in the entire league. The Jets, one of the best pass defenses in the entire league. Lawrence, of course, at least in my opinion, much better than Zach Wilson. I think most people would probably agree with that, but the spot for Zach Wilson, just so much better. So yeah, I definitely have interest in captaining Zach Wilson. It's nice to see we actually have positive leverage in our sims on Zach Wilson at captain, but I do think that I'm going to do some lineups with Trevor Lawrence at captain as well. And like I said, I think that I might not really try to force the double stack too much. That's something that has changed as I've thought about this slate more. I'm thinking more and more like maybe the way that Trevor Lawrence spikes the upside to be the optimal captain would be he's running the ball more and putting up points on the ground. So maybe just doing a single stack with Trevor Lawrence when he's at captain. Zach Wilson, I still think I'm probably going to want to double stack. Maybe not. He also has some rushing upside, and maybe he also rushes it a little bit more. But yeah, a lot of interest in Zach Wilson at captain. We have negative leverage on Trevor Lawrence. I still think that he is a fine captain play, assuming that you like the lineup that you can build around it, because he is pretty expensive, and that's going to make it a little bit tough.
It's funny you say it, because I actually bet the longest rush on Trevor Lawrence earlier this week at 8.5, over 8.5, 9.5 now. But even with that toe, he's running not a ton, but he's very capable of doing so. At running back, let's talk running back here. And hey, appreciate all 1,200 of you guys being with us. We're working through every position here as we lead up to 8:15 kickoff. It's gonna be a fun game, I'm telling you. Or it's going to be terrible, but it'll be terrible in a fun way, and we can all enjoy it together.
That's right.
Travis Etienne. There's just not a lot of pass catching upside here right now. Do we see them change things up if the offensive line can't hold? It's possible. That's why there's so many moving parts and variables to this game that you don't typically see, even for a Thursday night football game. He's still going to get the large majority of carries going up against the tough Jets defense. They're great against the run. They're great against the pass. So I don't think we can read too much into this because he's still the workhorse back. But man, wouldn't it be nice if he started getting some opportunities in the passing game, especially on a night like this?
Yeah, it would be great. It's obviously a very tough defense that he's facing in the Jets. So that's going to hurt him. But I mean, he's been running routes on the past couple of games. He's run routes on more than 50% of offensive plays for the Jags. So he's at least getting, but he's also, as you said, he's been targeted a total of 3 times in those 2 games. So he's just not getting those opportunities, despite the fact that he is running routes. But I think it could flip at any time. And like I was saying with talking about the Jets running backs, Michael Carter could be more involved. I think that it could be the case with Travis Etienne too, that Trevor Lawrence, doesn't want to air it out when it's this windy and rainy and such. So maybe he will use Travis Etienne more as his escape valve. It does make me like Travis Etienne better, and it makes me like him better as a pairing partner with Trevor Lawrence. I do like Travis Etienne quite a bit in this game. Obviously, the matchup is the scariest part of it, but he is significantly cheaper than Trevor Lawrence. He's cheaper than Zach Wilson. We have positive leverage on Travis Etienne in the util, projected for 44% ownership, 49% chance to be an optimal. A little bit of negative leverage in the captain spot, 14% ownership, 11% chance to be an optimal. But he's one of the best projected players on the slate. And, he hasn't been that involved in the passing game. As we said, 3 total targets the past couple games. And then the 2 games before that, also 3 targets total in those 2 games. So the past 4 games combined for 6 targets, but he is very involved running the ball. He's rushed 13 times against Detroit, 17 against Tennessee, and then 19 against Dallas. So he will have opportunities. It's just a matter of will he get them through the air as well as on the ground. And I think that there is a chance here that he sees an uptick in targets just because they can't really throw the ball very far. So they might need to check down a little bit more to ETN.
Lawn guy with a super chat. I have to beat my cousin this week. Who would you start at flex? Zono? I'm assuming Zonovan Smith. Zonovan Knight. Yeah. Or DPJ. Merry Christmas and thanks, fellas. Yeah, Merry Christmas to you, man. It's got to be Zonovan.
Absolutely. Knight. Yeah, the game for the Saints and Browns is it's like a 30 implied team total. Yeah, the weather is so bad. Yeah, it's just going to be really hard to throw in that game. So obviously it could happen for DPJ, but yeah, if I have the choice between those two, it's obvious. It's very clear. Zonovan Knight for me in a great matchup against Jacksonville.
All right. Thomas Rensberger said it earlier. He said, Heaton the dab rig. Wait for me. I don't know how you guys do those dabs. That's not something I'm willing to dabble with. And no pun intended whatsoever there. Those things, that looks wild.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, look up that. I mean, times have changed back from when we had, I mean, sure, we would be doing gravity bongs in like buddies' bathtubs and stuff, with like you go down to the beach and they have those big tubs of pretzels. You cut one of those in half. Very inefficient use of weed, but you would do it anyway. You had all different rigs and contraptions and stuff, but they didn't have dabs back then. And boy, am I glad they didn't. It would have put me in outer space.
Yeah, I don't even know. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, look it up.
I didn't smoke weed out of too many weird things. The only thing I can think of is an apple. I know that
the apple was
when the apple
you didn't have anything else. Yeah. Liker said, just wanted to say thank you for everything you guys do with us for all these shows. Merry Christmas to all, and let's win some big money tonight. Hell yeah, man. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to all you guys.
Merry Christmas.
All right. Let's talk about the other side of this one with Zonovan Knight. Now, we talked about the matchup against Jacksonville. Look, they probably do want to run in this game. If they can get the run game going and keep the ball out of Zach Wilson's hands, that'll probably be a sight for sore eyes when it comes to Robert Saleh. Zonovan Knight, though, just looking at the ownership and everything here, we do have him, Neil, with the highest leverage score in the game of any other player. Zonovan Knight has the highest leverage score, and he has the highest optimal captain probability as well in our top showdown and single game plays tool. That is interesting.
Yeah, and not really a shock for me. I mean, he projects pretty close to Trevor Lawrence. Like he's just behind Trevor Lawrence in terms of projection. Trevor Lawrence, of course, being 11,400, Zonovan Knight being 7,000. So of the guys who just project really well, Zonovan Bam Knight is the cheapest by far. So it doesn't surprise me that we have positive leverage there, as you said, both in the captain spot and in the util spot. He is probably my favorite play on the slate, just like, factoring in salary. He's pretty clearly a great play. He should have a lot of opportunity, especially in this game where we might see more on the ground than usual. Not very involved in the passing game is really the only negative for Zonovan Knight. But if they are just trying to, run it out, he could easily get that 100-yard bonus and a touchdown. And, it's not the worst thing in the world necessarily that he gets a ton of volume and it's all on the ground, because that just increases the chance that he's going to get that 100-yard rushing bonus.
He's not going to be involved in the passing game very much. Not sure how much that matters. Matt Gajeski and I this morning talked a lot about Michael Carter too. Like what type of player is he in a spot like this where that he's going to run some routes. The only thing that sucks is like Zach Wilson doesn't check down like Mike White did. Mike White, Joe Flacco, those guys are check down kings. And you could be looking at, 8, 9, 10, 11 target games for Michael Carter. Now, we did see it earlier in the season. I mean, Breece Hall, actually, you know what? Matter of fact, now that I think of it, maybe those Breece Hall big target games were with Joe Flacco. It's entirely possible. Let's see. I'm curious.
Yeah, I was looking it up. I did not look up what happened with Breece Hall, but I mentioned this in my article about Michael Carter, that he so he's over the past 2 games, he's had 9 total carries, but he's ran routes on more than 50% of plays in each of the past 2 games. However, this is the word of caution that I gave. He's seen just 19 total targets in 8 Zach Wilson starts this year. In the 5 games that Michael Carter has played with other quarterbacks, he's seen 24 targets. So just targeted way more when he has anybody else starting other than Zach Wilson. He does have, I believe, one like 7 or 8 target game with Zach Wilson, so could happen. And again, we could see, a spike in his targets just because of Zach Wilson not being able to throw the ball far due to the weather.
Do you have any interest in playing Carter and Zonovan Knight together?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I talk about a lot, that people often don't want to play 2 running backs from the same team, but oftentimes if a team is running the ball well, they're just going to keep pounding it with both running backs. It's not going to be, this guy's having success, so we're just going to use this guy in this kind of matchup with the Jaguars defense. They might just be able to run all over them, and they might do it with both backs. And in this case, both are fairly, have good salaries here. I mean, Bam Knight at 7,000, Michael Carter just at 6,400. So, wouldn't necessarily take a ton for both of them to be optimal. So yeah, I think that's totally fine to pair them.
Like Zonovan Knight, captain, Michael Carter, utility.
Yep.
You cool with both of them in the utility? That's an interesting look.
Yeah, I have no issue with that either. Yeah, I'm trying to think of who I would want to be in the captain if I have both of them in the utility, but right. I mean, it could be, there are a lot of different ways to work it out where it's going to make sense to have both of them in the utility and have captains. Probably not, like, I probably don't want Zach Wilson in the captain spot with both running backs. But other than that, I think, just about anybody could work there.
Do you have any interest in JaMycal Hasty? Just, I have to ask because it's a showdown slate and we could see a lot of running back opportunities. 23% of snaps last game. I mean, I'm not including a guy like Snoop Connor in here. He played 3 snaps, but Hasty was at least on the field for 16 plays. Any thought on him being viable, not a captain, but as a flex?
I do. I think that JaMycal Hasty is viable. We don't have many great options on this slate that are going to be under 10% owned. I think JaMycal Hasty is one of the better ones. He's going to be involved in the game most likely anyway. Like he usually plays 20-30% of snaps, should have a handful of carries. But then you add in the fact that this is a weather game where they might just want to run the ball more than usual. So then if they're wanting to run the ball more because they can't really throw the ball, they're probably going to mix JaMycal Hasty in there more than they usually would. Even if he's not getting like a higher percentage of the carries, he'll just get more if the total number of carries goes up. But then on top of that, he's got the outs of, obviously, you don't want to wish an injury on anybody, but he is the obvious beneficiary if Travis Etienne gets hurt. And then he's also would probably benefit from garbage time. So he has plenty of outs. As far as options that are getting like under 10% ownership, I think he's, one of my favorites there, with the obvious caveat that there's a good chance he does not do a whole lot because he's probably not. I mean, as I said in my article, he's carried the ball 5 total times and seen 1 target over the past 2 games. So has not been extremely involved in the offense. It's kind of, I'm writing the narrative where I think, maybe in the win game, both teams want to run the ball more. And if they do, I think that, they're not just going to run Travis Etienne 35 times. They're probably going to give JaMycal Hasty a larger number of carries.
Guess what, Neil?
Let's hear it.
You know how we talk about no house advantage and the overlay and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
And the $50 first match deposit bonus? They just upped it to 100, baby.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right.
Upped it to 100 first match deposit bonus. All of the tools that we have, totally free, built by Alex Baker, Awesemo himself over at Stokastic. They're entirely free. The no house advantage optimal lineups tool, the no house advantage player projection tool, all that free. $100 first match deposit bonus. Links in the description. Use that so you can take advantage of it. Link is in chat. Mike can throw it in there now. And if I had to guess, because all that stuff is nice, but it doesn't amount to the amount of overlay. Mike, if I had to guess, there's a lot of overlay at no house advantage right now, or are they beginning to fill up? $38. 46% with 30 minutes to go. With a half hour to go. No house advantage, boys and ladies. Take advantage of it. And they got against the house too, where if you hit all your picks, you 21x your entry, which is a sick format. But when you're playing against the field, just like anywhere else, you can MME. You can play it however you want. You're just taking props. It's basically DraftKings Showdown in a sense. Without the salary cap, when just taking props, because the ones that you like the most go at the top, they get the most points. The ones you like the least go at the bottom. They get the fewest points. They lose. It's that simple. There's very little learning curve here. If you're listening to this show and you're taking in this information and you're doing your own research, you can dive right into that and have success. Plus, you could not even have a great lineup and still probably cash because it's 48% filled right now at No House Advantage. $100 first match deposit bonus. All the tools are free over at Stokastic.com. Link is in the description and in the chat. Check it out. Great sponsor, great partner, great site over there, and it keeps getting better. Anything else for running back, or should we move to wide receivers here?
Yeah, I think we can move on. I'm not playing any of like the James Robinson, Ty Johnson, Snoop Connors.
No, me neither. Wide receiver, I kind of like Christian Kirk in this spot for a couple of reasons. One, Detroit did not target Sauce Gardner once all week last week. He basically became second coming of Darrelle Revis, although Darrelle Revis is still alive. Darrelle Revis' younger clone. Now, he's a stationary corner, so he's going to line up essentially exclusively on the left side, unless they do something weird today. Like they're not gonna shadow Jones, but Zay Jones. But I think if you look at the Jets too, the middle of the field is where they rank 19th against receivers. They're first on throws to the left side, surprise, surprise, to the right side, and then to the left side, they're like third. I think Christian Kirk could have some decent PPR totals in this game, also accounting for weather. This is a spot where he's expensive, and that's what makes it difficult. I was honestly surprised by this, and I mentioned it this morning to Matt Kajeski. I was legitimately surprised that we have Christian Kirk projected for this much more ownership than Zay Jones. I really thought at their respective price points that it would be flipped. So as much as I like Christian Kirk, I can't help but look at our top showdown and single game plays tool, look at the optimal captain probability, look at the leverage score, look at the top play probability, and then look at the ownership because it's all in that tool, and be like, I like him less now. I really thought that Zay Jones at that price would be way more popular than Kirk, and that's not what we're showing right now.
Yeah, I think that it's really hard to predict here. So there have been some weeks that I'm like, this ownership is clearly too low. This ownership is clearly too high. I honestly, I have a really hard time predicting what the ownership is going to come in at here, because I think a lot of people, obviously everybody saw Zay Jones put up, I think 3 touchdowns in the last game. He's obviously coming off a monster game, but I think everybody across the industry is talking about how tough this matchup is with Sauce Gardner, and I can't even remember the name of the cornerback on the other side, but they're, yeah. So they're elite back there. Somebody's probably going to be covering Zay Jones. And, I've heard people say that they don't think, I can't remember what the show was. I've watched a lot of shows this week, but they don't think that Zay Jones is going to be able to do anything against this defense. Whereas Christian Kirk maybe has a little bit more talent. Maybe he'll be able to do a little bit better. I don't know. It's I trust the tools with this kind of stuff more than that kind of hypothesis. We have some negative leverage. As you said, we've got some negative leverage on Christian Kirk. 8.2% projected ownership in the captain spot, 7.2% chance of being optimal. That seems about right. I mean, it is going to be really tough for Jacksonville to throw. I mean, even in a dome, it would be tough for them to throw on this Jets defense. You throw in the wind and the rain, man, it's hard to imagine they're going to have a ton of sustained success. They might have, a play that, goes wrong for the defense, but it is going to be hard for them to have sustained success, I would think, throwing the ball. So yeah, I don't know. It's a fine spot for Christian Kirk. I thought this was interesting. So this is we're seeing some rain in this game, right? It's It's supposed to get a lot worse at halftime. Now I looked at the radar. I could be a meteorologist at this point, Neil. They know no better than I do. Look at the radar, go to the weather.com, go wherever you want to go. And look at the radar. It definitely looks like the rain gets heavier around 9:30, 10 o'clock, but we'll see. I mean, the wind seems to be not that, like, it probably 13 mile per hour, 15 mile per hour. Not great, but not crippling either, I wouldn't say. Right. So I actually, so I was listening to Eric Beimfor earlier today. I'll give him credit. He was talking about how he was a defensive back, and I thought he made a good point on a show today that it is easier for the receiver than the defensive back when it is slippery on the field, because the receiver knows exactly where they're going. The defensive back doesn't know where the receiver is going. They have to react, and it's harder to react quickly when the field is wet. So I thought that was an interesting point. Maybe that's a benefit if it's, if there's the grass is wet, but the wind isn't as bad as we're thinking it might be, and it looks like it's probably going to be worse in the second half. Maybe they do have the ability to break one off just because defensive back slips. Maybe they can have a big play. And I think Christian Kirk certainly is a guy who's capable of putting up some big plays. So I can't really say I have a strong preference here. I think that I do prefer Christian Kirk to Zay Jones just because Christian Kirk is the pretty clear wide receiver one. Zay Jones is obviously coming off the kind of game that you can't really expect from Zay Jones consistently. I think that it's more likely that Christian Kirk puts up a big game. He is 10,200, so it's a little bit prohibitive there, the price tag, but I do like Christian Kirk a bit, despite the negative leverage we have on him, both in the captain spot and the util spot, looking a little bit overowned, but not a ton. And I think that, he might have 8 or 9 targets in this game if they are trying to throw the ball. Zay Jones, yeah, it's pretty interesting to see how low owned we're projecting him for. 5.7% captain ownership, 27.6% util ownership, a little bit of negative leverage in the captain spot where we have optimal 4.2% of the time, a little bit of positive leverage in the util. We're projecting him for he's optimal 27.8% of the time in our sims. I don't know. It's hard for me to really want to take a stand on either of these guys. It looks like the field has it about right, playing Christian Kirk about 40% of the time, Zay Jones about 34% of the time. Seems to be about right. I don't think I'm trying to take a major stand on either of these guys.
Yeah, I was just hoping that the field wouldn't have it right. I was hoping there would be an overreaction because I'm with you. I do like Kirk more in this spot. I think both are viable for sure. They Absolutely. Have to be. It doesn't matter if the weather, they have to be viable, right? We're still talking about a single game slate here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everybody, I mean, not everybody, but everybody who's going to probably see some targets is going to be viable. And these guys are the wide receivers 1 and 2 for the Jags. They're viable.
Hell, I have no problem having lineups with Kirk, Lawrence, whatever, and then Jets and Jaguars defense. I just think there's a lot of different things you can do today that are perfectly reasonable, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different ways to build on this kind of slate. You can build some lineups that don't account for the weather at all. You can build some lineups where you say, hey, they're not going to be able to throw the ball. Maybe I'll just play more running backs and defenses. A lot of different ways to approach this.
All right. Talk to me about Marvin Jones here. Marvin Jones is the least likely to see a lot of Sauce Gardner. That would be my assumption. Just stick him over there and let him run sprints at this point. Do you have interest in him or Braxton Berrios today?
Yeah, I mean, Marvin Jones looks fine. He's not somebody I'm going out of my way to get to. Looks like we actually have, he's coming in at relatively low ownership. So that does make me a little bit more interested. 0.4% projected ownership in the captain spot, 0.3% chance of being off. But we actually have negative leverage on Marvin Jones, both in the captain spot and in the utility. Where in the util, we have projected for 12.4% ownership, 9.1% chance of being optimal. But that's relatively low ownership for somebody that like me that likes to leave some salary on the table. I do think it makes sense to go to a little bit more Marvin Jones because, I mean, he just scored a touchdown last week. He is pretty involved in this offense. The past couple games, he's run 60 to 70% of routes. Pretty involved there. He's playing a good number of snaps. He had 6 targets in the last game, just won the game before that, but he had 6 targets the last game, including 1 in the red zone. Yeah, I think I have some interest in Marvin Jones. He's not somebody that I've honestly given a lot of thought to today just because he hasn't really stood out from a projection standpoint. He's not the lowest owned guy, but at 12% ownership, that is fairly low ownership. So I do have some interest in Marvin Jones. Jamal Agnew, yeah, I talked about him as one of my plays that I like, who is going to get very little ownership. We talked about this earlier on the show a little bit, just that he's a guy that could benefit from the bad weather and the tough defense. If the Jaguars need to get a little bit weird to try to score on the Jets, particularly in this game, he is the kind of guy that they could do, a reverse short pass to Jamal Agnew, where they're just letting him do the work. They're not trying to throw it down the field because of the wind. They're just give it to your speedster and let him, do the work for you. So I think that Jamal Agnew probably does benefit a little bit from the bad weather. And even without that, I wrote about him in my article earlier today, he doesn't get a ton of opportunities. Let's see, he's run just 34 routes over the past 5 games, but on those 34 routes that he's run, he's been targeted 16 times. So like if he's out there running a route, they seem to be wanting to go to him. And I could see this being a game where they want to go to him even more. He's 2,000, not projected for a ton of ownership. So I'd say Jamal Agnew, one of those players that I like, who's going to be low owned, who I think should have some opportunity.
You'll like this then. In that bad weather game against the Eagles, Jamal Agnew had both of Trevor Lawrence's receiving touchdowns.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Not necessarily indicative of anything, but like you said, hey, bad weather game, maybe. It makes sense too. He had 3 carries. He had 3 rushing attempts. I didn't watch them. I don't know if they were like end arounds or whatnot. But he had 3 for like 53. I think he's a perfectly reasonable play. I mistakenly said Berrios because I had in my head already moved on to the Jets. But let's do that now. And if you guys don't mind, could you be as kind to hit that thumbs up button? Got 1,500 plus people watching with us. Not only that, right? But Christmas is right around the corner. Your gift to us is just taking that single second and hitting the thumbs up. Our gift to you, well, is getting to see Neil and myself on the screen. No, our gift to you, as we always do, 3 free days. Best time to take advantage of all of our NFL tools is right now because, well, you got Thursday and then you'd have Saturday as well. And if you did it now, honestly, at this rate, I would bookmark this link, click it tomorrow morning. So then you get Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You could prepare for Saturday and Sunday. Then you have the Sunday slate, all the showdown, everything, the main slate, afternoon slate on Saturday. Sunday, you get those showdown, you get everything, right? And then our tools would still be updated for Monday as well. There's only a couple times of the year where you get football in this many days in a row, or mostly consecutive days. And that's the time to take it. You don't take advantage of a deal like this on a Tuesday. That'd be silly, right? You take advantage on like a Friday morning when you have Saturday football. So either tonight or tomorrow, whatever it is, bookmark the link or click it now. Get all of our tools, ownership, top stack, boom bust, all of our showdown tools, the brand new lineup generator, which is sweet. And we also have it for showdowns, not just main slates, everything we got totally free. And if you hate it, you can bounce. We ain't holding you hostage here. All right. We're no Jeffrey Dahmers around this way, Neil, unless you got something to tell me.
I have not watched that documentary yet. I've heard that it's really dark. I do like true crime stuff, so maybe I'll watch it at some point. But yeah, it sounds like it's a pretty dark story there. I kind of know the story. No, I do not have anybody locked up in my house or in my fridge.
Okay. That's good. That's good. Thank you for clarity. Casey with a super chat. Okay, so this is a T-Law, Daniel Jones in a dome, or Huntley.
It's Daniel Jones for me against the Vikings defense.
It's got to be Daniel Jones. I don't like him as much as other people do this week, but it's definitely Daniel Jones. It is. Yeah. You're right. And his rushing upside. How worried are you about Zonathan's ankle? I'm not. That was from Matty Mitch with a super chat. It's weird that he popped up on the injury report. It is, not going to lie. Very strange. After getting a full practice in Wednesday. But if he's expected to play and they're not, we can only go off of what we know, right? So I can't lie to you here and say, yeah, I'm real worried about it when we don't have any inside information. So, and then Neil, a picture on Adam's wall. The picture on Adams, I saw that today. Chris sent that to me. Picture just fell off Adam's wall, poltergeist style, while he was doing a show. Guy doesn't know how to hang shit. Wow. He says, "Who is Neil's nobody?" All right, Showdown Shaman. He says, I'm down with Agnew if he's low on. Don't ask about the name. Long story. I'm stuck with it for 12 days now. Oh, I thought it would be the fact that a picture fell off Adam's wall during the NBA Deeper Dive. But
that's probably what it is. That's probably what it is. He probably just changed his name today and now he's stuck with it. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Jamal Agnew is a guy that I've talked about quite a bit. And I just saw, so Eric Trani, I think, in chat just mentioned, yeah, he played 15% of snaps in the most recent game. But that's the point I make. Like, he's not a player that I'm playing with high confidence. He's a player that I'm playing only in large field GPPs, maybe like a mid-sized GPP. You can play some Jamal Agnew, but we're not playing him because he's going to have, he's likely to have a ton of opportunities. But As I mentioned, 34 routes run total over the past 5 games. So not on the field a ton, not running a ton of routes, but on 34 routes run, being targeted 16 times in that span, like they're putting him in there when they want to use him. I think that this could be a game where they want to use him more. So we could see an increase. Obviously, I don't know, but we don't have too many like really low owned options. Jamal Agnew, I think, is a guy that could benefit from this bad weather and the tough defense. He's the kind of guy that can break open any defense with his speed. So I like Jamal Agnew quite a bit. I would say other guys, and I mentioned all of these guys in my article. So this, if you read the article, not going to be surprised to you. On top of Agnew, I'll throw in JaMychal Hasty, just because he's got additional outs with the bad weather. He could be more involved in a regular game script, and then of course has the outs of an ETN injury or garbage time. Braxton Berrios, for the same reason as Jamal Agnew, can be used a little bit in a lot of different ways. And he is
segue this into Jets receivers too, because we only got 14 minutes left.
Okay. Yeah. So Braxton Berrios, another guy that I think could benefit from the bad weather. He's used often on like short plays. He could benefit a little bit. He's just 1,600. And then CJ Uzoma also projected for little ownership. I don't know if that's going to hold after he scored 2 touchdowns in the most recent game. Maybe he gets a little bit of a game log chaser kind of spike. But he's another guy who's going to be relatively low owned. As far as the Jets receivers, Garrett Wilson, pretty clearly the wide receiver 1 for the Jets. He is the highest projected. He's going to be the highest owned. We have, he's basically neutral in the captain spot, slight positive leverage in the util spot. We're projecting him for 8.8% captain ownership, 8.5% chance to be an optimal, essentially neutral. And then in the util, 37% ownership, 40% chance to be an optimal. So some positive leverage on Garrett Wilson. Obviously a much better matchup for these Jets receivers than the matchup for the Jags receivers. The Jags defense, much worse against the pass than the Jets defense. So it's a pretty good spot for Garrett Wilson. Outside of Garrett Wilson, I mean, so it's interesting because Zay Jones had this big game last time out. We're not really sure. Maybe his ownership comes up a little bit, but he also, we've got Corey Davis coming back. I think that probably cuts into Zay Jones a little bit into his opportunities. Sorry, I'm talking. Zay Jones is on the Jaguars. That's not who I mean. Who was I talking
Garrett
about?
Wilson. Wait, who?
Elijah Moore being the other one. Not Zay Jones. Elijah Moore all the way down at 4,800. Hard not to have some interest there. He has seen an uptick in terms of targets recently. In the past 3 games, he's seen a good number of targets in each of them. Most promising, though, like obviously we were attributing that to Mike White coming in and throwing it to him more. But in the most recent game, Zach Wilson was a starter and Elijah Moore still saw 7 targets. So maybe some room for optimism there after the 7 target game with Zach Wilson. However, Corey Davis is coming back. So I could see Corey Davis cutting into Elijah Moore's opportunities a little bit. It's kind of a hard situation to read. It's not, I'm unclear if Elijah Moore, like maybe Zach Wilson is starting to target him more, recognizing that he's a talented young receiver that maybe you want to get the ball to, or if it's just Corey Davis is out. So Elijah Moore benefited. But I think both of these guys are fairly interesting. They're, going to be involved and they're in a much better spot than the Jaguars receivers are.
So if you looked at week 13, that was the last week that Wilson, Elijah Moore, and Corey Davis were healthy together through the entirety of the game. Wilson played, almost all the snaps. Elijah Moore played 68% of snaps. He probably plays even more because he's been playing more. And then Davis played 81%. Berrios played 24% of snaps, but Mims was also active and he played 19% of snaps. Mims and Jeff Smith are inactive tonight. So I think you're going to see Davis, Moore, and Wilson play the large majority of snaps here, and then Braxton Berrios clean up the scraps. Not to say that he can't get a few looks, but just looking back from only 3 weeks ago when all 3 of these guys were healthy, Garrett Wilson, Moore, and Davis were all certainly on the field for the large majority of this game.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I mean, Braxton Berrios is kind of an off the wall play. I like him as a low owned play, not a high probability play. I think that pretty clearly Davis, Garrett Wilson, and Elijah Moore are the top 3 receivers for the Jets. They're the guys that I would expect to get more opportunities. I think that Braxton Berrios is kind of an off the wall play that could see some additional opportunities because of the bad weather. They might have trouble, throwing the ball downfield, and Braxton Berrios could benefit from that. So I think that we could see more opportunities than usual for Braxton Berrios, but I like him because he's 5.2% projected ownership, not because I'm expecting him to be extremely involved in the offense and get a ton of volume. It's just, he might have a couple opportunities to break one off for a touchdown, and he's only 1,600. So he's not a high probability play, but a play that I like relative to his ownership.
If you had to rank these receivers today, obviously with ownership and leverage and salary in mind, how would you rank the Jets receivers 1 through 4?
Yeah, it's still going to be Garrett Wilson, number 1. He's just very clearly the wide receiver 1 here. After Garrett Wilson, I think I'd go to Corey Davis at 25% projected ownership at 5,600. Then probably Elijah Moore. Man, those two are a toss-up for me. Braxton Berrios is still, the 4th, despite the ownership. I like him. I'm going to play more than the 5% that we haven't projected for in terms of ownership. It's tough because Elijah Moore is so cheap and we know the talent is there. It's tough for me not to like him a little bit, but I would say clearly Garrett Wilson 1, probably factoring in ownership. I'd go, maybe I'd go to Elijah Moore 2, just because he maybe is getting increased opportunities and he's only 4,800 and he's projected for lower ownership than Corey Davis. I don't totally trust that because I think people want to click the Elijah Moore name more than Corey Davis, but I don't feel confident about that. So I'd say Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Braxton Berrios.
Okay. Let's talk about tight ends here. And by the way, for defense and kicker, let me get this out of the way now so we can make sure to build a lineup. And for anybody that's trying to get it in now, we're not doing you guys a disservice. I like both defenses in this game. I think with Zach Wilson on one side, with the weather being an issue, I'm still not convinced this weather is going to be as bad as everyone's making it out to be, but we'll see. I still think regardless, both of these defenses have significant upside, and similarly, none of them are they're not overpriced. Like they're both sub 4K in a game with a 36.5 point total. Kickers I'm less interested in here. It isn't to say that you can't get some production from them, because I still think you can. And if the wind and rain, like they're gonna happen, but if it's not unmanageable, you could see some opportunities. Neil, quickly though, what are you doing with defense kickers? How are you playing those?
Yeah, so I definitely like the defenses better than the kickers because of the weather. It's going to be tougher for these kickers in the wind. It makes it obviously a lot tougher. They do, but like if they are able to kick the ball, if it's not as bad of weather as we're expecting, it is a low total game. So kickers are maybe a little bit more likely. I mean, I guess there's a give and take with that, because sometimes, kickers are more likely because of all of the other players who are expensive and putting up high scores. So then being able to save salary with the kicker makes them more valuable. But on the other hand, now if it's a low scoring potential game, well, if a kicker has, 4 field goals, maybe that's enough in a game that doesn't have a ton of touchdowns. So I like the defenses better than the kickers, because I think, with weather being kind of a factor, plus the 2 sophomore quarterbacks, obviously Zach Wilson has a much better matchup, but he's not a very good quarterback. Trevor Lawrence, I think, is a pretty good quarterback, but much tougher matchup with the Jets. So I like the kickers better than the defenses. I think I like the Jets defense number 1, followed by the Jags defense. And the kickers, I'm honestly not going to play a ton of them. I think I'm probably going to be underweight to the field on the kickers, just because I do have concerns about the weather.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree. I'll have some of them, but not as much as I normally have in a game with this low of a total. I think we can agree on that. Last week, CJ Usama had the 2 touchdowns, which was significant. But you know what? If you dig into this a little bit, he's still getting very little ownership. So I understand it. But he only ran, what was it? He ran 10 routes.
Yeah, he was not more involved. Yeah.
Yeah, 10 routes. Conklin ran 20, so twice as many. I still think Usama's fine, not because of the salary, because him and Conklin are basically the same price, but just because he's getting a quarter of the ownership that Conklin is. I'm not really sure there's any more analysis that needs to go into that. Conklin is the better play. He will be on the field more. He will run more routes. Conklin, because he's so similarly priced, is going to have way lower ownership than Usama is going to have way lower ownership than Conklin.
Yeah, I think that is likely the case. I think, and he should. I mean, Conklin has been the clear tight end 1 for the Jets. I don't think that Usama's 2 touchdowns is going to, he's going to jump in the pecking order. It was kind of interesting. I have some concern around Conklin, just because weeks 13 and 14, he saw 15 targets. And with those 15 targets, he had a total of 37 yards in those 2 games. So just didn't do much with his targets. And then he saw a lower route participation last week. He ran routes on just 44% of plays in week 15, which was his lowest route participation since week 5. So I think there is some chance that they are going to, like with Conklin kind of failing recently, and then Uzama coming in and scored 2 touchdowns. There is a world in which they do give Uzama more opportunities, but I think it's more likely that Conklin is still the guy, and you can still get him at relatively low ownership. So I have some interest in both of these tight ends. I have currently a little bit more of Uzama just because he's coming in at under 5% ownership, whereas we've got Conklin at 18%. But Conklin's certainly the much safer play. Like, you're not playing Uzama in a cash game kind of setting. I don't know if you're playing Conklin either, but you could at least, he's more reasonable there.
We only have 4 minutes. So quickly on the Jaguars, Evan Ingram, and anything else you have, real quick, so we can build a lineup and get these guys out of here so we can watch some football.
Yeah, I mean, Evan Ingram obviously just had that huge game a couple weeks ago. That was pretty exciting. We know who Evan Ingram is. He's a guy who projects pretty well, point per dollar. He's 7,600. I think, maybe they target the tight ends a little bit more too. They also, tight ends, another position that could benefit from a bad weather game a little bit, because they're typically not going as far downfield. They're generally bigger targets. So if it is windy, maybe the tight end's a little bit safer. I think, we've got positive leverage, a little bit of positive leverage on Ingram in the captain spot, 4.2% ownership, 4.7% chance of being optimal. In the util, a little bit over-owned, 24% ownership, 22% optimal. I think he's a fine play. I'm not playing any of the backup tight ends for Jacksonville.
Okay. All right. Well, let's build a lineup here. This would be a fun way to close out the show. And again, Merry Christmas to all you guys. If it's the last time you see us, I'll be back tomorrow. Neil will be back on Saturday. All my betting content for the week is over on the Odd Shopper channel. And if you're looking to get into betting, the link to get 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum, $240 value, and up to $1,000 risk-free bet is right down there in the description and in chat. All you got to do is deposit $10 when you use that link. Get all of our tools, get everything, access to our Discord for 2 months, and whatever. If your bet loses, you get all the money back in free bets anyway. So you're risking literally nothing. All right, Neil, go first. The captain. Who do you want?
Let's go with Zonovan at captain.
Okay. I'm going to throw in Christian Kirk here.
All right. I'm going to go right back to that double RB stack. I'm going to go with Michael Carter.
Okay. I like it. I'm going to go Jets D.
All right. How much salary do we have left over?
You have plenty, right? We have almost 10,000 per player. We got 2 players left.
We got Kirk in there. Let's throw Trevor in there as well.
Okay. 7,900. I'll close it out. I have no problem going Ingram here. And I don't have a problem going Jets D in a spot like this. In this weather, you could see Lawrence get into early trouble. They fall behind, and then he's forced to throw. And because they're behind, Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight get a lot of work in a game where they're just trying to maintain the lead and chew up clock. That build makes sense to me, Neil, and we just did it in less than a minute.
Yeah, I like it.
Awesome. You guys are the best. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday. We'll be back. Why do I keep saying that? You'll be back. I know you can't stay away. Enjoy the game tonight. Let's go Jags, baby. Let's get Doug Peterson into the playoffs. What do you say?
I'm with it. Yeah, let's do it.
Follow Neil at PlayerQ DFS. Check out everything he's got going on. You'll see him back here in a couple days. Me at Loughran_D. And shout out to Mike Lawrence for producing this one, as always, late at night. We'll see you guys. Good luck tonight. Peace.